Nashville Public Radio serves Middle Tennessee in many ways every day, including through this podcast. You can support it by leaving a review or rating, by telling a friend about it, or by contributing at WPLN.org/give.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's June 6, 2025. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. And I'm sad to say this is the day we say goodbye and best wishes to my colleague Char Daston, who's leaving Nashville and WPLN to pursue some different opportunities. But you know how some folks sort of mentally check out a little as things wrap up? For students about to graduate, we call it senioritis, right? Well, Char has gone to the opposite end of the spectrum. And I'm breaking format a little with this podcast today to share what you might call Char's senior thesis. Often when a reporter covers a story, they have to make the difficult choice to leave out some potentially interesting tangents in order to keep their final report to a certain length. It's never easy to cut those details from a script. About a year and a half ago, Char covered a really interesting story about a rite of passage with way more moving pieces than can fit into our standard feature slot. And that's the time in Morning Edition that we're able to play a longer story. It's limited to 5 minutes and 55 seconds. You usually hear those stories at the end of this podcast, too. Well, this one was about a young Murfreesboro man from a family of Thai immigrants who chose to follow a tradition that many immigrant kids have left behind, becoming a Buddhist monk for a short time at the start of his adulthood. Char mostly focused on the ceremony at the start of that experience. That was the most digestible chunk for a standard feature-length story. But the young man kept an audio diary throughout his time serving as a monk. It really bothered Char that he had so much rich and deep material in hand and so little room to include it. But he cut things down to size, included a few of those clips, and gave a strong overview. It was a good story. Char maintained contact with the young man after that temporary religious service ended, and he kept thinking about the audio diaries. And now, as his parting gift to us, he's produced the longer, fuller version. It's essentially an audio documentary short that really lets us go into the thoughts, observances, and epiphanies that marked Don S.'s time as a monk. And that's what's coming up in a few minutes after the newscast.
You know how important WPLN News has been to you and your family, and you have seen how high-quality local journalism is necessary to a thriving community. You can ensure that this service stays strong and stays available to all of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Join the Producers Circle with your gift of $100 or more each month and make the bold statement that you support the mission of a more informed and engaged community. Start your philanthropic journey with Nashville Public Radio today at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. This week, President Donald Trump banned people from 12 countries from entering the U.S. He severely restricted travel from 7 additional countries. There's some overlap between nations on the list and the home countries of refugees here in Nashville. The American Immigration Council, a pro-immigration think tank, estimates that around a quarter of refugees who settled in Tennessee last year came from Venezuela, which is on the severely restricted list. Around 10% of new refugees came from Afghanistan, and about 5% came from Myanmar. Both of those nations are on the banned list. This means many new refugees living here are effectively cut off from their friends and family back home. The federal government is selling the Estes Kefauver building on Broadway in downtown Nashville. The Nashville Business Journal reports the Trump administration approved an expedited sale of the 824,000 square foot structure last week. That means the General Services Administration can skip a step. Instead of reaching out first to local government and nonprofits to determine if they could use the building, the federal agency can go ahead and accept bids from private developers. The federal court that used to be housed in the Kefauver building moved into a new courthouse several years ago. The Army Corps of Engineers still has an office there. It's looking for space to lease elsewhere in the Nashville area. Nashville's Metro Council is in the midst of one of the toughest parts of their job, deciding on the city budget. Last month, the mayor put forth his proposal for the budget, and earlier this week, the council held their annual public hearing, a chance for residents to request changes to that budget. That could mean moving money around to dedicate more dollars to certain programs. People pointed to affordable housing and youth safety as priorities. But according to the council's budget chair, Delicia Porterfield, one thing that likely won't change is the tax rate set by Mayor Freddie O'Connell.
So I do think that there is a desire among some of the council members to reduce the property tax rate. I've heard about, potentially increasing the rate. I will guarantee you that my substitute budget will not increase the property tax rate.
As budget chair, Porterfield will submit a substitute budget. Other council members may also draft substitutes. The council must agree on one budget by the end of the month. Otherwise, the mayor's proposal will take effect. Metro Nashville government will pay around $1.5 million in a lawsuit settlement that will benefit developers. The Tennessean reports that beginning in 2024, the city charged something called a stormwater capacity fee to anyone who built new buildings or additions on their property. The money was meant to pay for new improvements to Nashville's stormwater system to offset the shrinking amount of open land that soaks up the rain. The Beacon Center, the libertarian think tank that sued the city, argues the public at large, not just developers, should pay for stormwater improvements since everyone benefits. The city agreed to stop charging the fees back in December when the lawsuit was filed. Now they've agreed to pay back everyone they charged in the first place. After a 17-year hiatus, Brood 14 cicadas are emerging across Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia. Jonathan Larson, an entomologist with the University of Kentucky, likes to call them the bourbon brood. Larson says they can't bite. They're just trying to mate before they die. It's believed they are the same harmless brood that frightened the Pilgrims in the Plymouth colony in 1634.
They encountered a brood of cicadas. It is believed it was Brood 14 that they encountered. And as they came out, their only point of reference for such a huge group of insects was the biblical locust swarms.
But unlike locusts, cicadas don't eat up trees or crops. People who spot cicadas can log their entry into an application called Cicada Safari. They can also collect the husks and send them to Austin, Texas artist Diego Miro Rivera to be included in a piece of cicada artwork. In Tennessee, Brood 14 is mostly found near the Cumberland Plateau. The geographic center of Tennessee is a spot near Murfreesboro that's marked with a monument, an obelisk made of stacked stones and mortar. People who regularly pass it on Old Las Casas Road are worried the small tower seems to be leaning. WGNS radio reports officials say there's not been any structural compromise, but the Rutherford County Historical Society, which erected the small tower in 1976, is expected to review the situation. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
A gong rings out in the main hall of a Buddhist temple called Wat Lao Buddharam. A young novice in a white robe kneels on the floor while his parents and brother kneel behind him. A senior monk blesses the family. The young man is about to become a monk himself. His head is shaved. Then he walks 3 laps around the temple grounds. Elders throw coins as a blessing. Don Srisuriyo is taking part in a Thai rite of passage called the Naga ordination ceremony. A young man becomes temporarily ordained as a Buddhist monk and lives briefly at a temple. Don will spend 8 days side by side with the other monks. He'll pray when they pray, eat when they eat, sleep when they sleep, and follow all the same strict rules. Don's dad, Lee Srisuriyo, explains.
When he become a monk, he cannot touching women. Any women, even their mom. And you can eat from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. only. And after 12, you can drink only water.
Plus, he has to repeat prayers in Bali, an ancient scriptural language. Don's ordination at Wat Lao Buddharam looks like thousands of others across Thailand. Except, we're not in Thailand.
Wait, where do I stay?
We're in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where Don grew up. Don doesn't consider himself a Buddhist, and he doesn't know Bali or Buddhist theology. He works at the local university as a student engagement coordinator.
I knew absolutely nothing at all going into the entire process. So when we got into the ordination hall and I had to repeat the monk that was administering the ordination, I had absolutely no idea what I was saying or what I was responding to. I just repeated what they told me to say.
So why is Don here, praying, eating, and sleeping at the temple? For Don, the decision feels simple. The ritual honors his parents.
If he become a monk, that means that mom and dad will go to heaven when they pass away. That's what it is.
But he's also searching for something, a better understanding of his own heritage, stuff he missed out on growing up around Americans.
I don't want to call it racism, but I grew up with kind of the indifference and kind of the ignorance, and this is my way of deepening my connection to my Thai culture.
Usually these brief monkhoods last several weeks, even months, but he only had so many vacation days. So he settled for an 8-day stretch during the university's spring break. Then he told his mom and Srisuriyo about his plan.
I said, really, Don? Are you sure you want to do this? It's not easy, okay?
It turns out those 8 days would push Don immensely, but also offer him his own kind of enlightenment about his relationship with his family and organized religion. It's day 1 of Don's 8-day journey. After the 5-hour ordination ritual ends, the tables are cleared, and the crowd goes home, Don says goodbye to his parents and his partner, Kylie. He settles into his new room, wearing his new orange robe. Then, Don records his first of many audio diaries.
It's a strange thing. I can fail this, and that has a lot of consequences for myself and for my family, and that's a lot of weight to carry. And the first barrier to that is the rules. I have no idea what they are. I can only do so much reading beforehand, but I only have 7 days to be a good monk. Not a lifetime.
He was overwhelmed. There were so many new rules to learn. How to wear his robe correctly, Bali prayers to recite by heart. He fell asleep that night worrying about what the other monks thought of him. On day 2, the physicality of sitting and praying for hours on end began to take its toll.
The one thing that's hurting the most, though, is sitting on my knees, and I am afraid that I'm going to damage my lower legs just by sitting on my knees for way too long, because it is really uncomfortable, and I have no idea how people sit like this.
But sitting in that discomfort, reading deeper into Buddhist practices, he realized the rules he was so worried about, most of them amounted to be a good person.
And there's nothing that I really could have broken other than speaking out of turn about one of the other monks, lying if I stole something.
Things weren't as sink or swim as Don initially thought. Instead, he had a lot of time to ponder the meaning of the rituals and figure out what to take away from this experience. Here's an entry from day 3.
So hopefully by the end of my time here, I'm at least able to say a few chants from memory in Bali. There was 2 that were pointed out to me that I needed to kind of figure out to be able to recite. The one I do know is the refuge chant. That was at least the English name, but it goes like Buddham Saranam Gacchami Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. But that's not the one that I need to know.
By day 4, Don had adjusted somewhat to the rhythm of temple life.
Oh, and on the bright side, my knees didn't hurt that bad. So maybe I'm having more discipline, or maybe I'm getting used to it, or maybe I lost some blood vessels already.
He was able to turn his focus outward a bit.
The monks have ear pods. Like, what's up with that? I mean, like I said, I have no idea what's changing, but like phones and ear pods, that's completely different from what my image of a monk is. My bad. They're called AirPods.
On day 5, the day began with an early morning lesson.
In the morning after our morning prayer, which happens around 4 a.m., Ajahn took me to the temple because it's raining outside, and he taught me walking meditation. It's supposed to be slow and deliberate because we're supposed to be paying attention to what our foot feels and the movement of our lower body as we walk.
Lunchtime was also unfamiliar territory. Community members would bring food every day. The monks depend entirely on what the community gives them.
We had a few of the Lao community members give us specific foods from different regions of Laos. And we had a very interesting dish today. So I'm not really an adventurous eater, but if you're a monk, you have to kind of sample everything, or it's disrespectful if you don't. And one of the monks tried to explain it to me. I'm not sure if I understood his translation of it right, but he said ant eggs inside of, I think it was like basil or something. It kind of looks like a paste, like this kind of goopy mess, but then there's like these tiny white sacks in there. I don't know. Like, it was so bizarre. Like, how do you get insect eggs? Who's your insect egg dealer? No offense to the lady that brought the dish. I'm sure it was great. But maybe I'll save that for later.
One of the community members who showed up every day was his mom, Anne.
It is really important for me because a lot of people that go to the temple, they cook Laotian food and it's spicy, and Don cannot eat all kinds of food that they cook over there. So I'm kind of worried, he might get hungry because he is my youngest son and I spoil him like crazy. Just like helicopter mom. So everywhere he go, I would want to be there with him.
For Don, it was a relief to see his mom checking on him every day. But that wasn't the only reason she was there. This whole time, she'd been in communication with the monks. Without her, Don's ordination might not have happened at all.
My mom had to really fight for me to be a monk there.
She'd spent a month shopping for food, offerings, religious items special ordered from Thailand. Don's lack of knowledge of Buddhist rituals was a barrier for him.
So that's why we get like two monks, like a babysitter, to help him say how to pray.
Essentially, she was Don's advocate, making sure his experience at the temple was a good one. He reflected on this in his diary.
I appreciate that she comes by. I know she's worried about me, and I appreciate that she's worrying because, like, it's not like my parents kind of like allow me to do this and throw me out to the wolves. But, like, despite certain parts about my upbringing and how my parents treated me, I do appreciate that they're able to support me now, and that any past actions are forgiven.
Growing up, Don felt a certain gulf between him and his parents. He'd have questions that are awkward for any family about things like sex and relationships, but the culture barrier made those things feel even more unmentionable. He felt like he had to figure out hard stuff like that on his own. At the same time, he would sometimes have to help his parents with basic day-to-day tasks.
This is the thing I think a lot of immigrant families go through is, if someone doesn't speak English or the common language in the country they're in, if the children are native speakers or at least bilingual, they end up being the person that is the language and cultural translator. And, that's a lot of pressure to ask of someone that's like 9 years old, talking to an adult about something very serious like taxes or like making an important purchase. I guess in a strange way, I turned the tables on her and that she became the cultural translator and that she got put into the position that me and my brother were used to.
The reversal of roles, who was culturally translating for whom, it felt like all of a sudden Don had this deeper appreciation of his parents for who they were.
It's a little bit sad to me that it took something so life-changing, something so significant for me to just understand my parents better.
In that moment, Don forgave his parents for the gulf between them, for all the moments he'd felt adrift from the people he was supposed to be closest to. And he asked them to forgive him.
Because, the reason why I'm doing this really is for them, and like, if I didn't forgive them in some way, then like, what would be the reason for me to do this? And I turned out okay, despite everything. And I wouldn't be the person I am today. I'm certainly haven't lived my life as I should have in some regards. All that to say, Pa, Ma, Kapka,
Thai for Dad, Mom, thank you so much.
ร่วมกันกับเธอแรกกัน3เทื่อผู้ที่เป็นเก่าเทื่อจบแล้วก็ขอให้มีความสุขกายสุขใจ
Day 6 at the temple started with an offering.
One of the community members brought a sapling, and I believe the reasoning behind it was because I had became a monk, I should leave something at the temple. Like everyone that has a tambun or has done something specifically that's on the higher end of doing good should plant a tree to commemorate it. And then like in X amount of years we would have like a forest.
It's yet another Buddhist spiritual lesson Don was learning that week, tied in with the concept of reincarnation. Sometimes there are goals that take more than one lifetime to accomplish.
Today has been the day that has engaged my mind.
Day 7, a big day.
Today has been the day that is my own personal test on what I've learned.
A test because it's the day Don's worlds collided. His first appearance as a monk in an environment where people didn't understand what that meant. That day, his parents invited him and some of the other monks out to lunch at a restaurant in Murfreesboro. The restaurant opened at 11 a.m., so when they got there, the clock was ticking. Remember, the monks absolutely had to finish eating by noon.
Not even like 2 minutes in, we kind of start like a small disturbance.
Another rule, the monks couldn't be served food by a woman.
So my mom's talking to this lady, and my mom explained to her about needing a male server.
At some point, Don tries to give the staff a fuller explanation of what was going on, slipping back into that cultural translator role.
I had the mode where, I need to fix the situation. It was disrespectful that I intruded on what my mom was trying to facilitate. It was just a very high pressure situation because there were so many aspects of myself that I had to be. I had to be, Don the son, plus Don the monk, plus Don the person.
Plus Don the American.
Yeah. I had to be so many things at one moment in time.
After a few minutes, a man from the kitchen was able to seat the monks, and eventually a male server showed up. But by that time, Don was pretty shaken.
I honestly almost lost my appetite because, I mean, at any point in time, really, like, we could have just been thrown out. I felt so bad. Like, I felt like a bad person. Because socially, and maybe in the business sense, I know I was in the wrong. But religiously, like, I was in the right because I have no other choice but to go along with that procedure, which is it's kind of exciting, but kind of like eye-opening too, because it's like I've never been on the side of I have religious justification.
He took on this challenge of becoming a monk to better understand his heritage and explain it to other people. But as he thought through this moment in the restaurant, Don realized there were some things he learned that he didn't want to defend.
And this is where I'm going to go like very deep into what I read about Buddhism. You know, to achieve enlightenment, to achieve nibbana, one of the things we have to do is, you know, like let go of our senses, let go of our cravings, our perceptions and things, and, you know, to be so focused on strict interactions with women makes no sense, because if we were truly on the path to enlightenment, then sexuality and gender don't matter. So why should it matter when we interact with other people if they're women or not? Really? Where's the room for some dignity, some respect? Like, I'm not even supposed to address my mom directly.
Buddhism encourages people to come to their beliefs based on experience. And in a way, that's just what Don did.
And I'm thankful that I'm not a person that just takes stuff at face value and does as he's told. Because that's not the life I would like to live. That's not a very guided life, a self-guided life. Yeah, everything about my rant today is like reasons and parts on why I'm not a part of organized religion. The doctrines, the traditions, the lack of explanations, the entitlement. It's all too much. That's a bit like reductionist, but like, where's the meaning in everything? Why does it have to be gate-kept?
On day 8, Don prepared to go home, with this last thought still ringing in his head. A rite of passage is a bit of a paradox, because it ties you to everyone who's done it before, but it's also something you have to experience as the individual you are. Don had done everything he was asked as a monk. He engaged seriously with Buddhist theology, and he came to this deeply personal conclusion on his own. There's one more twist to Don's story. The switching of roles between him and his parents went even deeper than he realized. In becoming a monk, he'd unwittingly created this full-circle, intergenerational moment in his family. See, Don's dad, Lee, became a temporary monk when he was a young man in Thailand. But Lee's dad didn't.
My grandfather was 100% Chinese, so my grandfather didn't have to do something like that culturally.
When Lee became a monk, he bridged a cultural gap between himself and his father. And decades later, on another continent, Don did the same thing, his way.
I did it for my dad, but Don did it for me. That's why it is so happy. I just like to lift something out of my chest.
Sometimes we may just have to have goals that last beyond our lifetime. There just shouldn't be a definite end simply because our lives come to a close.
This story was edited by Miriam Knight. Special thanks to Tony Gonzalez, Justin Barney, and the entire Srisuriyo family. Sound in this story was recorded at Wat Lao Budaram, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. For WPLN News and This is Nashville, I'm Char Daston.
As I said before, that extended story was Char Daston's parting gift to WPLN News. We wish him the best of luck as he moves on to a new chapter. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up next week.